"Are you okay?" Leah asked softly, crouching just enough so that her eyes met his. The man flinched at her voice. He hadn't expected anyone to speak to him, certainly not a woman like her. His eyes darted up, uncertain. He was black, tall, but hunched as if trying to disappear into the cold sidewalk. His beard was speckled with the damp mist of New York's late winter, and his coat torn at the sleeve clung to him like it, too, had endured one storm too many. He looked at her with something between surprise and embarrassment. I'm fine," he said, but the words barely made it out of his dry lips. Leah didn't flinch. She held his gaze, a calm warmth in her eyes. "You don't look fine," she replied. "Wait here." She turned and walked into the corner deli without another word, though her mind swirled. Her wallet held $7.50. That was supposed to cover bus fare and maybe a coffee after her job interview tomorrow. But as she ordered 2 bowls of chicken noodle soup and 2 sandwiches, she didn't hesitate. Her fingers trembled not from the cold, but from the quiet certainty that sometimes kindness is more important than security. When she returned, she handed him the food. He accepted it with both hands, like someone holding something sacred. He looked at her again, this time longer. "Thank you," he said softly, still avoiding direct eye contact. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said, sitting down beside him on the curb, "but I wanted to. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to let us know in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far kindness can reach. And if you believe in the power of second chances and unexpected connections, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us all. Even the smallest act of compassion can change everything. They ate together without many words. The soup steamed into the air between them. The sandwich wrappers crinkled gently in the wind. No names were exchanged, no stories were told. But something passed between them, recognition, maybe, or grace. Back in her small apartment in the Bronx that evening, Leah hung up her coat and was greeted by the smell of cinnamon and the sound of classic jazz. Martha, her elderly roommate, looked up from her knitting. "Did you see something good in the world today?" Martha asked, as she always did. Leah smiled faintly. "I shared lunch with a stranger." The next morning was brisk and bright. Leah dressed carefully for her interview at Vail Tech, a promising tech firm her parents had long hoped would straighten her path. She wore the only blazer that still fit right and wrapped her scarf twice to hide the frayed neckline of her blouse. This wasn't just about the job. It was about reclaiming a part of herself after a long season of rejection. She arrived early, just as she'd planned. The receptionist smiled and offered her a bottle of water, then ushered her up to the 24th floor. "The CEO wanted to meet you personally," the receptionist said with a wink. "New guy, a bit unconventional." The elevator doors opened and Leah froze. Standing by the window, dressed in a perfectly tailored gray suit, was the same man she had fed yesterday. Only now, he stood tall, confident, and composed, like a completely different person. Their eyes met. He blinked in recognition, then offered a small, knowing smile. "Good morning, Miss Thompson," he said. "I'm Jordan Reed, CEO of Vail Tech." Leah's breath caught. "We've met," he said gently. "Though yesterday, I was hardly CEO material." There was a beat of silence, and then a quiet laugh between them, soft, human. The interview that followed was less of a test and more of a conversation. Jordan asked about her values, her sense of purpose. Leah spoke candidly about her past failures, her dreams, her belief in giving people second chances. As she walked out of the building, her head was spinning not just from the shock, but from the realization that her single act of kindness had intersected with fate in a way she couldn't yet understand. Back home, she found a letter slid under the door. She opened it with trembling hands. "You're hired," it read. And beneath that, in Jordan's handwriting, "I'd very much like to share another meal with you on better terms." What Leah didn't know was that Jordan Reed wasn't just her new employer. He was the man her parents had quietly arranged for her to meet their would-be fiancé in a marriage neither of them had yet agreed to. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Leah sat by the kitchen window that night, stirring her tea long after it had gone cold. Martha had already gone to bed, humming some old Duke Ellington tune down the hallway, but Leah's thoughts were restless. Her phone lay untouched on the counter. No texts, no emails, just the folded letter from Vail Tech she kept reading over and over, especially that final line. I'd very much like to share another meal with you on better terms. What did he mean? Was it gratitude? A joke? Or something else? Jordan Reed. The name sounded familiar, but only because her mother had said it so often these past few weeks. He's stable, Leah, from a good family, polished, handsome, I hear. Don't make a scene when you meet him. That had been her mother's last message before flying off to Phoenix for a church retreat. Leah had rolled her eyes at the time, but now, her stomach twisted. Was this really the same Jordan? She hadn't planned to text him, yet somehow found herself typing, "Thank you again for the opportunity and the conversation. You've made a very strange week, even stranger," he replied 2 minutes later. "Then let's make it stranger still. Dinner tomorrow?" Leah stared at the screen. She knew she should pause, think, but her fingers moved faster than her doubts. "Sure. After 6? 6:30. I'll pick the place." She set the phone down and exhaled, a mixture of nerves and electricity running through her. The next evening, she stood in front of a cozy jazz bar restaurant called Ella's in Soho, unsure if she was early or just nervous. Then a voice behind her said, "Didn't expect to see you in heels." She turned, heart skipping. Jordan stood there, still in a suit, but this time it was open at the collar, more relaxed. His smile was softer, too real, not the kind corporate men wore in boardrooms. "I almost wore boots," she said, and they both laughed, the tension breaking like a cracked shell. Inside, Ella's glowed with amber light and slow saxophone melodies. It smelled of roasted garlic and aged wood. Leah noticed older couples holding hands, talking quietly over pasta and wine. There was a comfort here, the kind that reminded her of something she couldn't name, maybe one of her father's favorite supper clubs back in Cleveland, before everything changed. Over dinner, Jordan asked questions, but not the kind you'd expect from a CEO. He didn't care about her resume. He asked about the soup. "What made you stop?" he said, sipping his wine. "You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything." Leah paused. "I saw your hands shaking. I've been there before. When you need help but feel too proud to ask." He nodded slowly. "That was a rough morning. I'd just arrived in the city. Wallet stolen on the train. My driver was delayed. I thought I'd take a walk to clear my head. Dumb idea." "Not so dumb," she smiled. "You found lunch." They both laughed again. But there was something else underneath now, mutual recognition, of shared weariness, of battles quietly fought. As the night unfolded, Leah told him more than she expected about being laid off from a nonprofit job after budget cuts, about her father's stroke and her mother's overwhelming pride, about how it felt to be 32 and starting over. Again, Jordan listened without interruption. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "My mother raised me alone," he said. "We lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Detroit. She cleaned offices at night. Said the world wouldn't give me anything unless I took it first." "Is that why you became a CEO?" Leah asked. "No," he smiled. "I became a CEO to prove her wrong. That kindness doesn't make you weak, that you can lead without stepping on others." Leah looked at him carefully. "And did she live to see it?" He shook his head once. "Passed 2 years ago, pancreatic cancer." She reached across the table, gently touching his hand. No words, just connection. They didn't talk about work after that. They talked about jazz, and baseball, and which Christmas movies aged best. Jordan confessed he still cried at the end of "It's a Wonderful Life." Leah admitted she hadn't cried since her father's second stroke. When they stepped out into the night, the city was quiet, dressed in golden lights. Snow flurried lightly. He walked her to the subway. "I'd like to see you again," he said, almost hesitant. "I think you will," she replied. "You're my boss, remember?" He smiled, but she saw a flicker of something else, uncertainty. "About that," he said, "there's something you should know." Her stomach tightened. "I didn't know who you were when you gave me that lunch," he began. "But later, when I saw your name on the interview list, I recognized it. Your parents, the arranged meeting. I wasn't supposed to show up until next week, but I came early. I needed to see for myself." Leah's breath caught. "So this was planned?" "No," he said firmly. "Your kindness wasn't. My interest in you wasn't. But yes, our families had something in motion. I just didn't expect it would feel this real. She took a long breath. I don't know how to feel about that. Neither do I, he said, but I'd like the chance to figure it out. Honestly. No pressure. Just dinner, more soup, whatever you'll give me. She looked at him, then really looked. A man not defined by status or polish, but by the way he'd looked away, humbled, on that cold sidewalk. The way he'd listened tonight, with more heart than ego. She didn't answer with words, just a nod, and as he turned and disappeared into the lights of Soho, she felt something shift. Not everything, but enough to begin. The next morning, Leah awoke earlier than usual, the afterglow of the previous evening still lingering in her chest like the final notes of a jazz melody. She lay still for a while, eyes tracing the cracks in the ceiling, replaying Jordan's words. Your kindness wasn't planned. My interest in you wasn't either. There was sincerity in that statement, trembling honesty that felt rare in a world full of polished lies. Martha was already in the kitchen, sipping her morning coffee and listening to the radio softly. You came home glowing last night, she said without turning. Did he dance you around the city like Fred Astaire? Leah chuckled. Not quite, but he made me laugh. And he listened, really listened. That alone makes him a unicorn, Martha replied dryly, passing her a mug. Now don't let him charm you out of your sense. CEOs are smooth for a reason. Leah nodded, the warning registering, but somewhere deep inside, her instinct said Jordan was different, or at least, trying to be. By noon, she was at Vailtech again, her first official day. A HR orientation, a desk on the 14th floor, and a welcome kit that included a thermal mug and a leather-bound notebook. Leah kept mostly to herself, absorbing the office energy. The place hummed with quiet determination, smart people doing serious work, but not too self-important to smile or say good morning. It wasn't until lunch that she saw him. Jordan passed by her desk, a small nod and a flicker of something unspoken in his eyes. She appreciated his professionalism. No awkward moments, no favoritism. But as he walked into his glass-walled office, she noticed something else, stiffness in his gait, a shadow behind his eyes. He was carrying something today. An hour later, she found out why. A rumor floated from the legal department to the HR corridor and finally landed on Leah's floor. Vailtech was under federal review. A past acquisition had gone sideways, fraud allegations, misuse of funds, maybe even insider trading. The news hadn't gone public yet, but it was enough to cause quiet panic among the staff. By 3 p.m., Leah was summoned to Jordan's office, not by him, but by his assistant, Danielle. He was standing by the window when she entered, arms crossed, eyes on the skyline. You heard, I assume, he said without turning. Yes, she answered softly. Is it true? He turned to face her, the weariness in his face more pronounced than the night before. Parts of it. I inherited this mess, Leah. The previous leadership buried things. I'm trying to clean it up before it ruins everything. She hesitated, then stepped closer. Why me? Why call me up here? He took a moment. Because you asked me last night if I became a CEO to prove something. I didn't tell you everything. I also took this job because I thought I could fix things quietly, thoroughly. I need someone I can trust in communications. Someone with a clear head and a clear heart. I've been here for one day, she said, astonished. Exactly, he said with a hint of a smile. You're not part of the system yet. You're still clean. It was risky. It was crazy. And yet, Leah felt the old pulse of purpose returning. She hadn't felt that in years, not since she coordinated community programs at the nonprofit before funding cuts swept it away. I'll help, she said, but I need full access. If I'm going to protect the company's voice, I need to know the truth, all of it. Jordan nodded once. You'll have it. And Leah, don't let them break your faith. You still believe in people. Don't lose that. They worked late that night. Leah sifted through documents, internal memos, old press releases. Jordan fielded calls, met with legal advisors, and occasionally passed her notes or coffee. At one point, they sat on opposite sides of his office couch, papers strewn across the table, eyes bleary but focused. You're relentless, he said, watching her annotate a 20-page report. I'm thorough, she corrected. And I don't like being lied to. That makes two of us. By midnight, they found a Paterna trail of emails from a former board member who had since disappeared from public view. It was enough to confirm Jordan's suspicion. Someone had orchestrated a shell deal years ago, then covered it up when the merger went through. The trail wasn't airtight, but it was a start. Leah leaned back and rubbed her temples. "This could ruin you," she said plainly. "I know," Jordan replied, "but not telling the truth already has." There was silence, the kind that isn't empty but full of something unsaid. Then Leah spoke, almost a whisper. "When you were on that sidewalk, were you really stranded?" He looked up. "Yes. And no. I had help coming. But I didn't want to wait. I wanted to see how the city treated people like me, when I looked invisible. And what did you find?" He looked at her, his voice soft but unwavering. "You." That was the moment something shifted between them, not romantic, not yet, but something deeper, trust. The kind built not on gestures, but on action, on being seen for who you really are beneath the titles, the suits, the history. They parted that night with a nod. No lingering glances, no promises. But Leah knew this wasn't just a job anymore. This was a storm, and she had decided to walk right into it alongside a man who had once looked at the world from a cold sidewalk, and now looked at it from the corner office, hoping to change it. It was a gray Thursday morning when Leah received the anonymous envelope. She found it on her desk, slipped discreetly under a stack of interoffice memos. No name, no return address. Inside was a single USB drive taped to a folded note that read, in shaky handwriting, "If you want to know who started this fire, follow the money, not the press releases." Her hands tingled as she turned the drive over, then looked up and scanned the floor. Everything looked normal. Two marketing interns laughing by the printer, someone from IT adjusting the thermostat, but Leah's instinct said otherwise. This wasn't just internal gossip anymore. Someone inside the company wanted the truth to come out. Someone who had watched too long from the shadows. She took the drive straight to Jordan's office. He was already in a meeting, so she paced outside, glancing at the USB again. The words on the note echoed in her mind. Follow the money. It wasn't just a cliche, it was a map. And if she was right, it would lead them somewhere a lot more dangerous than bad PR. 10 minutes later, Jordan opened his door, looking exhausted. "You look like you found a ghost," he said. "Close," she replied, stepping in. She handed him the note and the drive. He read quickly, eyes narrowing. "Did anyone see you with this?" "I don't think so," she said, "but we can't afford to wait." They plugged the drive into Jordan's secure laptop. It contained a folder titled Diversion. Inside, dozens of PDF scans, transaction logs, and email saw tied to a company called Carver Analytics. Leah recognized the name. Carver had been part of a joint venture 3 years ago, touted as a breakthrough in health data management, but it had gone dark shortly after. As they dug deeper, the pieces began to fit. Carver Analytics was a shell company, propped up with falsified contracts and laundered investments. The previous Vailtech leadership had used it to inflate quarterly numbers, funnel bonuses, and mislead stakeholders. Worse, the trail implicated several senior figures still working in the company, people Leah had seen laughing in the break room just this morning. Jordan sat back, his jaw tight. "This is bigger than I thought," Leah nodded. "This isn't about bad accounting. This is deliberate fraud." He rubbed his face, the weight of it all pressing into his features. "If we go public with this, we'll be throwing dynamite into our own foundation. If we don't," Leah said, "you're part of the lie." That stopped him. He looked at her, really looked, then nodded slowly. "I'll take it to the board," he said, "but we do this right. Legal channels, no leaks." Leah agreed, but inside, she felt the first real tremor of fear. She wasn't just an employee anymore. She was a witness, and in a company this big, that made her a target. That evening, she returned home to find Martha waiting on the couch with 2 mugs of tea and her usual calm presence. "You look like someone who's about to jump off a cliff," the old woman said, patting the cushion beside her. "I might be," Leah sighed, "and I don't know if there's water or concrete waiting at the bottom." Martha chuckled. "You know what my husband used to say about cliffs? The scariest part isn't the fall, it's deciding whether to jump." Leah leaned into her shoulder, grateful for the warmth. Later that night, she couldn't sleep. Her phone buzzed just after midnight, a message from Jordan. Board meets tomorrow. I'm going in with the files. You were right. We can't cover this up. She typed back, whatever happens, you're not alone in this. The next morning was quiet, tense. Leah stayed in her office, working on contingency communications, while Jordan entered the boardroom with a folder labeled, Full Disclosure. Hours passed. Coffee went cold. No one smiled in the corridors. At 2:17 p.m., he emerged. His face was unreadable. Leah stood as he approached. They voted to investigate, he said. No firings yet, but they know the truth, and they're scared. Scared is good, she said. It means they're listening. But just as relief began to settle, his phone buzzed. He glanced down, then showed her the screen. It was a message, unsigned. You should have stayed quiet. Leah's heart stopped. Someone's watching, she whispered. Jordan's eyes darkened. We rattled the wrong cage. That night, Leah walked home, checking over her shoulder more than once. The city felt different, closer, tighter. Like someone was listening behind every closed door, but she didn't regret it. Not one word, not one action. This wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about truth, about the silent pact between decency and action, about standing beside someone not because you had to, but because you believed in the fight. As she stepped into her apartment, her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. Heroes fall the hardest. She stared at the screen, then slowly set the phone down. She wasn't a hero, but maybe, just maybe, she was becoming one. The following day unfolded like a long, taut breath, quiet but full of pressure. Leah moved through Vailtech's hallways with practiced calm, though inside her nerves hummed like electric wire. She'd never been part of something so high stakes. Her work with nonprofits had involved urgency, yes, but not threats, not anonymous messages that made you question every glance, every shadow. She tried to focus. Scheduled a meeting with the internal communications team. Drafted an early-stage statement in case the story leaked. Avoided unnecessary small talk. But the chill lingered like the eyes of someone standing just outside your peripheral vision. It was nearly 4 p.m. when Jordan appeared at her desk. He didn't speak, just tilted his head toward the stairwell. She followed him without a word. They ended up on the roof, a place she didn't know existed until now. The skyline stretched out in every direction. New York's late winter sky painted with streaks of lavender and steel. They're closing in, he said, leaning on the railing. The board has started asking questions they should have asked years ago. A few are lawyering up. I think one of them is leaking info to the press. Leah crossed her arms, the wind tugging her coat tighter. And the messages? The threats? He looked at her, eyes heavy. I'm not sure if it's one person or more. But someone inside doesn't want this cleanup to happen. She nodded. So what do we do? He hesitated, then pulled a small envelope from his coat and handed it to her. Inside was a contact card. Elena Marsh, Investigative Counsel. She's not internal. She used to work in federal compliance. I hired her off books. She's quiet, smart, doesn't scare easy. She'll protect us if things go sideways. Leah pocketed the card. Is this what being a CEO looks like? Playing chess in the dark? Jordan smiled grimly. This is what being a decent human in a broken system looks like. There was a pause. Leah took a step closer. You could still walk away. Say it wasn't your mess. Let them bury it. He shook his head. My name's on the door. That means something. At least it should. They stood in silence for a while, watching the last hints of daylight fade behind glass towers. For a brief moment, the city didn't feel so overwhelming. Just human. Back downstairs, Leah finally met Elena Marsh. Elena arrived without fanfare, dressed in gray slacks and a navy pea coat, hair pulled back, voice low and unhurried. She shook Leah's hand with a firmness that said she didn't waste time. I've read the drive, Elena said, joining them in a private meeting room. The Carver Shell Company was more than a cash dump. It was also a data siphon. They were stealing patient information and selling it to pharma middlemen. Leah's jaw tensed. Medical data? That's federal offense territory. Worse, Elena replied. If even a fraction of this gets confirmed, Vailtech's entire reputation goes up in smoke. Jordan exhaled. What's our next move? You build your firewall, Elena said. Internal leak protocols, secure access points, no emails unless encrypted. And you identify your enemies now before they identify you in court. That night, Leah stayed late again. This time she wasn't sorting press drafts, she was reading, cross-referencing, mapping out connections like she used to in her old advocacy days. Except now, the stakes weren't community grants or policy proposals. They were names, reputations, possibly lives. Around midnight, she found something. A calendar entry, buried deep in a shared server, linked to an executive named Dean Halpern, an old name in Vailtech, someone who'd survived 3 CEOs and always kept a low profile. The entry was coded, CVC, int, 3 p.m., Pelham. She looked it up. CVC was short for Carver Venture Consortium, the umbrella group behind the shell firms. Pelham was a private office complex in Westchester, just outside the city. The next morning, she showed Jordan and Elena. "You think he's still active?" Jordan asked. "If that meeting happened last week," Leah said, "he's not just covering tracks, he's coordinating." Elena folded her arms. "You said you wanted to fix things, Mr. Reed. Are you ready to step into the dark?" Jordan nodded. "What do you need from me?" "A car, a burner phone, and a good reason to be in Westchester next Thursday," she said. Leah raised her eyebrow. "You're going in?" "I don't rattle cages from afar," Elena replied. "I like to look the lions in the eye." The days that followed were a blur. Leah helped install encrypted messaging. Jordan met privately with board allies. Elena began shadowing patterns watching who left early, who changed phones, who made unusual requests. Martha noticed Leah's exhaustion. "You're burning the candle at both ends," the old woman warned. "Whatever this fight is, be sure you don't lose yourself in it." I'm not," Leah whispered. "I'm finding the part I thought was gone." And she meant it. This wasn't just about fixing a company. It was about proving that integrity still mattered. That doing the right thing, even quietly, still had weight. On the night before Elena's Westchester meeting, Leah sat again by her window, this time watching snow fall against the yellow glow of street lamps. Her phone buzzed. "Jordan, we're almost there. You're the calm in all this chaos. Just thought you should know." She stared at the message for a while, then typed back, "Keep steady, I'm right behind you." She didn't add what she really wanted to say. That she wasn't just behind him in the investigation. She was behind him, period. In belief, in hope, in the kind of silent loyalty that never asks for credit. Tomorrow, more secrets would unravel. But tonight, Leah allowed herself one quiet victory. She wasn't invisible anymore, and the truth, no matter how shadowed, was finally stirring in the light. Elena arrived at the Pelham complex at precisely 2:45 p.m., dressed in a charcoal coat, plain trousers, and boots scuffed just enough to say, "I belong here." The building itself was a sterile glass, shell-quiet, clinical, and forgettable, exactly the kind of place where secrets like to hide. She entered with a messenger bag slung over her shoulder, and the confidence of someone who wasn't new to this dance. From a safe distance, Jordan and Leah sat in a black sedan across the street, engine off, windows just cracked enough to keep the glass from fogging. "You sure she's okay alone in there?" Leah asked, not for the first time. Jordan nodded. "She's done this more times than either of us wants to know." Still, Leah's hands tapped nervously on her knee. She hadn't slept much. The pressure of what they were about to uncover pressed on her chest like a weight. If today went wrong, it wouldn't just blow up in the press, it could collapse everything they'd tried to build since Jordan's first day on the sidewalk. Inside the building, Elena moved with precision. She had an appointment fake, of course, with a shell company whose office occupied Suite 301. She didn't intend to keep the appointment. What she wanted was the hallway camera angles, the Wi-Fi activity, and most importantly, the moment Dean Halpern showed his face. And at exactly 3:03 p.m., it did. She caught sight of him exiting the elevator. Gray overcoat. Thin briefcase. Phone pressed to his ear. He didn't notice her. People like Halpern rarely noticed anyone who didn't wear a Rolex or interrupt their brunch. She slid quietly into the conference room across the hall and left the door ajar. Her phone buzzed. Leah's voice crackled in her ear through a secure line. "We see him. He's heading toward the back suite." "Copy that," Elena whispered. A moment later, 2 more men arrived, Doan she recognized from a former Vailtech acquisition, the other a younger man with nervous eyes and a jittery walk. Elena lifted her phone, snapped a quick picture, and sent it to Jordan. "That's Brett Avery," Jordan murmured in the car. "Used to manage our European division. Disappeared after the merger. No one knew why." "They're all in on it," Leah whispered. "This is their shadow boardroom." Oh. Meanwhile, Elena pressed her Bluetooth and began recording. The door across the hall opened, and muffled voices floated through. Keywords leapt out: dividends, pending sweep, liquidation window. She clicked her tongue once her signal. Outside, Jordan started the car and pulled away, driving around the block while Leah tapped out a secure email with the audio clip and photos, addressed to a trusted reporter at the Washington Post. Not for publishing yet, but as insurance. Proof that the rot went deep, and that someone had seen it. By 3:40 p.m., Elena slipped out unnoticed, her steps measured but quick. She met the car 3 blocks away and got in without speaking. The silence was heavy. Then she said, "They're moving fast. Within 2 weeks, they'll gut everything. Bank accounts are already in motion. If we don't act now, there won't be anything left to expose." Jordan gripped the wheel tighter. "Then we go to the authorities." "Not just yet," Elena said. "We need one more thing: documentation. Not just whispers and meetings. I need one of them to sign off on something traceable." Back at the office that evening, Leah stayed long after everyone else had left. The building was quiet, the hum of the elevator the only sound breaking the stillness. She sifted through documents, cross-checking signatures, dates, and board approvals. At one point, she found an old vendor contract linked to Carver signed electronically by Halpern himself. Her breath caught. She double-checked metadata, dates, IP logs. It matched. It was legitimate. She took it straight to Jordan. "This is it," she said, handing him the printout. "This document ties Vailtech to the shell firm and Halpern to the entire scam. We have our smoking gun." Jordan looked at her, eyes wide with something between pride and gratitude. "You found it. You said you needed someone clean," she said. "Well, I'm done being clean. I'm in this now, Jordan. All the way." He nodded, and for a moment, the air between them changed. Not just charged, but warm. Trust became something thicker, something neither of them dared name yet. Then her phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. It was a single sentence. "You should have walked away." Leah showed it to Jordan. His jaw tightened. "Let them watch," he said. "We're not going anywhere." They backed up the files to 3 separate encrypted drives. One went to Elena, one to Jordan's legal team. The third Leah hid in the bookbinding of an old, worn paperback she kept on her desk. A trick her father once taught her when she was a girl trying to hide diary pages from nosy cousins. That night, Leah lay awake again, not from fear but clarity. This wasn't about romance anymore. It wasn't even just about justice. It was about dignity, about what people owed each other, not just in contracts and signatures, but in presence, in loyalty, in the quiet moments where courage shows up without applause. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she wouldn't run. Not when truth was this close. Not when the fight had finally found its shape. By Monday morning, the air inside Vailtech felt different, not visibly, not to the untrained eye, but for Leah, every step through the glass doors carried tension. Whispers drifted faster, emails were briefer, eyes darted too quickly in meetings. Something was shifting, and not for the better. The previous night, Jordan had finally made the call. He was going to present the Carver documents and Halpern's contract to the full board. No more quiet warnings. No more softly diplomacy. Elena backed the move, warning that the longer they waited, the more likely the enemies inside would bury what evidence they hadn't already torched. "They'll either throw him out," Elena had said, "or crown him king." Now, in the morning's first executive meeting, Leah watched from the observation glass above the boardroom. Elena stood next to her, arms folded, eyes narrowed. Below them, Jordan sat at the head of the table, confident but not cocky, composed but bracing. "I've called this emergency session," he began, "because the integrity of this company is in question, not just from the outside, but from within these very walls." A few board members stiffened. Dean Halpern sat 2 seats from the end, face still, hands folded too neatly. Jordan continued. "We've uncovered documentation linking Vailtech's former leadership, and potentially sitting members of this board, to fraudulent shell companies. These companies siphoned money, falsified reports, and compromise sensitive user data. He paused. And I have proof. Gasps rippled through the room as Jordan placed the printed contract on the table. Leah could see their faces change, some pale, some red with barely contained anger. Halpern didn't move. He stared at the paper as if it were a grocery receipt. Then, finally, he spoke. "This is slander." "No," Jordan replied coolly. "It's your signature, dated, authenticated, linked to bank transfers." Another board member, a woman named Kendra, interjected. "Dean, is this true?" Halpern stood slowly. "I will not be part of a witch hunt engineered by a CEO with 6 months of tenure and a savior complex." "This isn't a witch hunt," Jordan said. "It's an audit." The room exploded in murmurs. Someone called for a legal review. Another member asked for an independent investigation. And Halpern, without another word, gathered his things and walked out, cool, calm, but seething. Leah turned to Elena. "That looked too easy." Elena frowned. "It was." Back in her office later that afternoon, Leah reviewed the security logs. At 11:17 a.m., just after the meeting adjourned, Halpern had accessed the internal servers folders linked to employee profiles, including Leah's. She clicked through and saw what he'd done. He'd tried to erase her file, employment history, internal memos, even her onboarding documents. Her entire existence at Vale Tech gone in 2 clicks. She called Jordan immediately. "He's not fighting this in the boardroom," she said. "He's going underground." Jordan's voice was tight. "We need to move faster." By that evening, Jordan, Leah, and Elena sat around his office table, laptops open, files stacked high. "We've poked the bear," Elena said. "Now it's clawing." "We need to publish," Leah said. "Not the whole report, just a leak. Enough to let the public know something's being exposed, so the board can't bury it." Jordan hesitated. "It puts us at risk." We're already there," she said. Elena nodded. "I'll draft something anonymous. Send it to a few trusted journalists. Make it look like a whistleblower inside finance. Not too specific, but just enough to make them panic." The post went live the next morning. A brief story on a well-known investigative blog, citing unnamed sources inside Vale Tech, accusing the company of internal corruption and financial misreporting. It trended on Twitter within hours. Tech journalists started circling. Stakeholders began asking questions. Halpern struck back by midday. A story hit the business wire. Vale Tech CEO accused of orchestrating coup to mask financial missteps. It included a grainy photo of Jordan from 5 years ago, at a private event with a hedge fund group later accused of speculative trading. The article was full of innuendo, short on facts, but it planted doubt. Leah stood in Jordan's office, reading the article out loud. "They're framing you as the villain." Jordan was quiet. "It's smart. Discredit the messenger. Muddy the water." Elena sat on the couch, stone-faced. "We expected this, but it means they're scared. Scared people are dangerous," Leah said. That evening, Jordan received a formal summons from Vale Tech's board to appear before an internal review panel within 48 hours. Terms: present defense, respond to allegations, risk termination. "They're moving to oust me," he said, voice low. "Then we go nuclear," Elena said. "Full report. All of it. Names, documents, timelines." Leah touched Jordan's arm. "Are you sure? Once it's out, there's no going back." He looked at her, eyes firm. "If we stop now, we're complicit. I didn't come this far to play politics." For the first time in days, Leah saw not just resolve in his face, but fire. She nodded. "Then let's finish this." That night, they finalized the report. Leah wrote the foreword, a powerful, clear-eyed statement of truth, accountability, and integrity. She wrote not as an employee, but as a citizen, as a witness, as a woman who believed that truth, even when whispered, echoed louder than lies, shouted from podiums. At the end, she signed only her first name, and hit send. To the press, to regulators, to history. The first strike had been made. Now the reckoning would come. The morning after the report dropped, the city felt quieter. Not because it actually was, New York never stopped humming, but because the sound around Leah had shifted. Every footstep through Vale Tech's lobby felt heavier, every glance more loaded. She walked past colleagues with tight-lipped smiles, some avoiding eye contact, others nodding in silent recognition. The report had gone viral overnight. Headlines screamed across every major business network. Whistleblowers expose massive fraud at Vail Tech. Jordan's face was everywhere on screens, in thumbnails, under banners with words like hero, liar, reckoning. Inside the elevator, Leah stood between two executives whispering furiously, unaware of who she was. "She signed her name, didn't she?" one muttered. "Or at least that's the rumor. They say she's the reason the audit committee finally acted." The board's panicking. As the elevator doors opened, Leah stepped out without looking back. Her steps didn't quicken. If they were going to talk, let them. In Jordan's office, the mood was taut but focused. Elena was already there, pacing with a phone glued to her ear, speaking in clipped tones to a contact at the SEC. Jordan stood by the window, arms folded, eyes on the skyline he once looked at with hope. "They've called an emergency shareholder meeting," he said. "They want blood." "Let them want it," Leah replied, setting her bag down. "We've given them the truth. They can't erase that." He turned to her, a flicker of tired pride in his eyes. "Your statement, it struck a chord. People are quoting you." She sat down, rubbing her temples. "I didn't want attention. I wanted justice." Elena hung up. "You're getting both. The DOJ wants a preliminary meeting. The SEC is already pulling the company's filings from the last 5 years. Halpern's name is all over the contracts." Jordan gave a grim nod. "He's going to retaliate. This isn't over." It wasn't. Just hours later, a security breach shut down Vail Tech's internal systems. Emails froze. Phones buzzed dead. On the top floor, IT scrambled to contain the damage while the legal team reviewed the leaked memo that had just surfaced another smear, this one falsely accusing Jordan of siphoning company funds to his own charity years ago. "It's a distraction," Elena growled. "Pure deflection, but convincing enough for people to hesitate," Jordan said. "The board will use it to stall." Leah checked her phone. More anonymous messages. One simply read, "You've made enemies in suits." She showed it to Jordan. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. "Signing your name?" She shook her head. "I regret waiting so long." By afternoon, the shareholder meeting began behind closed doors. Jordan wasn't invited, despite being CEO. A clear sign they were preparing to sever ties. Leah watched from the monitor feed, standing in a quiet break room as rows of investors and lawyers filled the sleek conference hall. Her palms were cold, her throat dry. The questions came sharp and fast. Who knew? When? Why didn't internal controls catch it? Jordan's name surfaced again and again, sometimes as whistleblower, other times as scapegoat. She turned off the screen. That evening, the official statement came. Jordan Reed was suspended pending a full investigation. Interim leadership would take over. The board thanked him for his service, but distanced themselves from the crisis now bearing down like a storm. He accepted it calmly. "They had to," he told Leah. "It's survival instinct. If they keep me, they look guilty. If they cut me, they look decisive. You were the one trying to clean this up," she said, voice raw. "I still am," he replied. "But sometimes, the system protects itself more than the truth." Later that night, in the quiet of Jordan's penthouse, a place Leah had only seen once, before they sat on the balcony, wrapped in coats, drinking tea instead of whiskey. The city glowed below, unaware or uninterested in the battles fought above its streets. "I don't know what comes next," he admitted. "Lawsuits, hearings. I might not be allowed within 100 feet of a boardroom again." Leah looked at him. "But your name will mean something, even if it's not on a corner office door." He turned to her, and for the first time since the scandal broke, his hand found hers. "Thank you," he said, "not just for standing beside me, but for reminding me why it mattered." She smiled softly. "You reminded me, too. That silence is a choice, and sometimes, so is courage." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. The intimacy between them had been built not on flirtation but on fear, on shared purpose, on standing together while everything around them cracked and shook. Before leaving, Leah stood in the doorway and said, "No matter what happens next, you weren't alone. And you won't be." Jordan nodded, his silhouette backlit by the city lights. As Leah walked down the hall, her phone buzzed again. This time, not an anonymous threat. It was a message from a young analyst in the finance department. I read your statement. I've seen things, too. I want to help. She stared at the screen and smiled, because truth, once spoken, doesn't disappear. It echoes, and sometimes it inspires an army. She arrived at the office early, the sun barely touching the skyline. The lobby was quiet, too quiet. Security guards roamed with tighter patrols, Idaho badges scanned more frequently, and the soft hum of background music replaced with sterile silence. Leah's badge beeped at every checkpoint. Word had spread. Jordan's suspension wasn't just internal, it was now public knowledge. Media trucks lined the street outside. Cameras flashed as board members exited through side doors. Shareholders whispered accusations into phones. Vailtech's reputation, once glowing, was now flickering like a candle in a storm. Jordan's interim office had moved to the 12th floor, leaving his glass-walled domain to others. Leah followed Elena up there, their shoulders set resolve sharp beneath the risk. Inside, Elena sat across from Jordan and two outside counsel. Their faces were tight. Legal language filled the room. Leah felt out of place yet central. Their voices lilted between cautious and urgent. The SEC wants voluntary cooperation, said counsel number 1. But the DOJ might pursue separate charges. Now that your suspension is public, the pendulum swings both directions. Jordan folded his hands. I'll give them everything, but I want full immunity for my team, particularly Leah. She had nothing to hide. Mercifully, no one objected. Elena slid Leah a glass of water. You're stepping into dangerous territory now, but you belong here. After the meeting, Jordan and Leah exited together into the hallway. She placed a tentative hand on his arm. Before you go, she said quietly, I want you to know one thing. Whatever the board says, this fight is just starting. He nodded with gratitude and worry intertwined. I know, and at least now, we have momentum. In the days that followed, Leah and Elena mapped out interviews, lined up whistleblowers, and prepared depositions. They discovered more. Internal emails revealed favoritism, data manipulation, and obscure clauses that redirected millions money that never reached R&D but went straight into bonuses for board insiders. One afternoon, Leah watched her screen freeze with news alerts. Former VP of Finance agrees to testify. Files submitted to SEC device encryption key confirmed. It was validation. The narrative had shifted. Vailtech wasn't just under fire, it was cracking open. That evening, Leah returned home and found Martha waiting with a casserole and 2 cups of chamomile tea. You're glowing again, she said with a knowing smile, like someone who's found reason in chaos. Leah allowed herself a smile. We're finally being heard. Later that night, Jordan texted, Can we meet? They agreed to dinner at a small bistro in the West Village. It was quiet and dimly lit, old world. A piano player in the corner strummed soft harmonies, familiar tunes that reminded Leah of childhood recitals. As they waited for their food, Jordan reached across the table and took her hand. You did more than help me, he said. You reminded me what leadership should be, not the one who wears the title but the one who owns the responsibility. Leah squeezed his hand, looking into his eyes. We did this together, and we're not done. Then the waitress brought their meals. It wasn't steak or something extravagant, just roasted chicken, salad, and mashed potatoes. Warm, straightforward. Leah commented, Some things don't need to be complicated. They ate in silence for a moment. The comfort of normal. Emboldened by their shared purpose, they spoke of lighter things, future travel plans, favorite books, the absurdity of retirement seminars Martha sometimes invited Leah to. After dinner, Jordan surprised her with a small envelope. She opened it, a handwritten note from the analyst who'd volunteered earlier. Inside was more confidential evidence emails tying anonymous perks to Halpern and other executives. Signed with initials, MGIE. Jordan looked up. More allies. Leah nodded. It means people are trusting. That's what fear melts. Several days later, the public hearing began. Leah sat behind Jordan with Elena and the legal team. The room was packed with reporters, shareholders, regulators. The board members, those left, appeared tense, polite, defensive. Jordan took the stand. Leah watched every twitch of his face. She remembered their first meeting, his hesitation, his humility. Now he spoke with conviction. He testified to everything. When he discovered the shell company, how he came to Leah, how they investigated. He spoke of Eleanor's foul play and shared evidence publicly. He admitted his mistakes, not digging in earlier, not trusting his instincts before. When Leah's name came up, he said simply, "I don't know what I would have done without her." Then he stepped down. Leah stood, too, to answer questions. The echoes of the courtroom rang with gratitude, agreement, even disbelief at the scope of corporate malfeasance. By the end of the week, the hearing concluded. Justice would take time, but the tone had shifted. Board members were being asked to resign. Regulators promised transparency. The story was no longer just about scandal, it was about renewal. That night, Leah returned home again to Martha's apartment, where the old woman was waiting with warm cookies and the same classic jazz softly playing. "Did you break it?" Martha asked. Leah smiled. "We cracked it wide open." Martha nodded, and for a moment, the weight lifted in Leah's chest. She felt connection to justice, to truth, to the possibility that second chances didn't just belong to people, but to systems, to companies, and to the choices they made. She knew more battles would follow, investigations, lawsuits, pressure campaigns, but she also knew she had found her voice, and no court could erase that. Leah awoke to her phone buzzing at 5:42 a.m. A breaking headline from a major business news channel. Exposed. Vailtech whistleblower speaks out chaos at the highest level. It featured a grainy shot of her walking into a courthouse exit, sunlight glinting off her hair. Beneath it, a smaller caption read, "Jordan Reed suspended amid internal rebellion." She stared at the screen for a moment, her heart pounding not with fear but with resolve. Last night's hearing might have closed, but the storm was far from over. At Vailtech, the air was taut. Coffee machines ran empty. Receptionists kept their heads down. Leah's badge beeped through one security checkpoint after another, each beep echoing like a code in her mind. Things have changed. She headed straight to Jordan's interim office. Elena was already there, arms crossed, reading briefs from regulatory bodies. Jordan looked up from his desk, weary but steady. "They're dropping subpoenas," Elena announced quietly. "From both state attorneys general and the SEC, requests for documents stretch back 8 years now." He nodded. "They're doing their job." Leah closed the door. "We've prepared everything?" Jordan sighed and unfolded a stack of binders. All files encrypted, all sources protected. Everything that connects Halpern and the board has been duplicated with Elena's oversight. Elena offered him a firm nod. "We still can't assume goodwill. We need to anticipate counterattacks, lawsuits, smear campaigns, damage control." Leah looked at Jordan. "What do you want me to do?" He paused, then leaned forward. "I want you to speak. Publicly." She swallowed. "Like press interviews? A televised statement?" Jordan caught her gaze. "Yes, you're the voice of this. The one who saw the system from the inside and chose truth over silence." Elena chimed in. "We'll prep talking points, but you need to speak from conviction. Not legalese, not defiance, just honesty." That afternoon, Leah found herself in a small studio near the Civic Center. Bright lights, camera crew. A journalist introduced her as the courageous Vailtech communications associate who helped uncover the scandal. Her hands shook slightly as she sat before the camera. The producer signaled they were live. Her voice emerged calm, measured. "I'm Leah. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a whistleblower in search of fame. I'm a citizen who chose to speak up when I saw wrong. When I realized silence was not an option. I believed then, and I still believe, that our values define us more than our titles. And yes, it's changed my life forever." She talked about integrity, about justice not being delayed by fear, about people who went unnamed but made a difference behind the scenes. She acknowledged risks, both personal and professional, without flinching. When the interview ended, Leah stepped outside. It was dusk. The city lights cut through the snowy twilight like embers. She pulled her coat tighter and walked a few blocks until she found Martha's door. Martha was waiting with tea and an old record playing Ella Fitzgerald singing softly. She poured a cup and said, "So you spoke?" Leah nodded. "I did." Martha leaned closer. "Good. The world needs people who say hard things out loud." Back at Vailtech the next day, the mood had changed again, this time subtly. Employees nodded when she passed. One junior analyst reached out, eyes misty. "Thank you for standing up." Another manager delivered a typed note. "We're behind you." Jordan found her later in the hallway. He placed a hand on her shoulder. She turned to him and met his ice honesty mirrored there. They walked to Elena's office together. Elena was on a call with attorneys. She motioned to them when the line ended. "We just got word," Elena said. "The board is planning to issue a public letter acknowledging wrongdoing, and they're considering offering Jordan a role in the transition team. Safe passage out, essentially." Jordan frowned. "Safe passage?" Elena nodded. "They want to control the message, limit fallout. It's pragmatic. They know your integrity helped contain the crisis, but they still need you out of the immediate line of fire." Leah cleared her throat. "You don't have to accept it." He paused. Stepping away could let the company change. Let regulators rebuild trust. Maybe that's what matters most. Elena looked at Leah. "And you?" Leah took a breath. "I plan to stay, whatever happens." Jordan looked surprised for the first time, not authoritative, but uncertain. Elena backed the statement. "Your public credibility is invaluable. You could help guide transparency internally. If Halpern and the others face legal consequences, you'll still be here defining what comes next." Their partnership had evolved, not romantic gestures now, but professional purpose, shared mission. That evening, Leah walked home through Central Park, stepping over fresh snow that glowed in the lamplight. The hush of the city felt full not of fear but of something shifting, a narrative rewriting itself. At her apartment, Martha waited with cookies and the sound of distant saxophone on the radio. Leah set down her bag and sat beside her on the couch. "They offered Jordan safe exit," she said quietly. "But not you?" Martha replied, raising an eyebrow. "No," Leah said, steepling her fingers. "They need me to help reset this." Martha nodded, leaning in. "Then you tell them yes, and don't look back." In the days that followed, Vailtech released the board letter. Jordan accepted a position on an external oversight committee, stepping away from daily operations. His departure was described as mutual and respectful. Leah was named acting head of communications, tasked with overseeing transparency, rebuilding internal culture, and liaising with regulators. It was a victory, quiet, serious, not perfect but real. She remembered the day she bought a sandwich for a stranger, how small gestures could ripple outward, how one act of conscience shears, his, Elena Scud, shift the trajectory of everything. That night, Leah and Jordan met for coffee in a nearly empty diner. It was simple. Shared warmth in ordinary moments. He looked across the table. "You're staying, huh?" She smiled. "Because truth still belongs inside, not just in headlines." He reached for her hand across the booth. She looked at the window, where snow continued to fall, and she whispered, "This isn't the end, just another beginning." The winter thaw began softly, the snow melting into silver puddles on the pavements. At Vailtech's Midtown office, a new rhythm settled. Leah arrived early, greeted not by hushed tension, but by faint smiles and quiet nods from coworkers. Her role in communications brought purpose and cautious optimism to the company's halls. Jordan, now part of the External Oversight Committee and no longer CEO, still came in occasionally for board meetings, investor briefings, or confidential sessions with regulators. His presence had shifted from command center to steady guide. When they passed in the hallway, they exchanged neither awkward glances nor dramatic glances, just mutual acknowledgement. Leah's day began with a meeting to roll out Vail Trust, a new initiative she had helped design, aimed at restoring internal transparency and public trust. Employees across departments were invited to participate in open forums, report anonymously with built-in protections, and receive updates via secure platforms. The program was designed to prevent future misconduct from festering in silence. In the presentation to senior staff, Leah spoke with clarity. "Our company almost collapsed because people were afraid to ask questions. Fear doesn't just cover up, it cultivates them. We're choosing a different path." Her confidence was natural. She had found her voice not in arrogance, but in integrity. After the meeting, a young manager approached her. "I don't know how to thank you," he said softly. "Vailtech felt like another family for me. I'm afraid it might vanish." You can help keep it alive," Leah replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Speak up, share what you see, hold us accountable." That afternoon, she headed to a lunch meeting with Elena at a small bistro near Union Square. The sun cut through the chill, warming faces shaded by scarves. Elena looked thoughtful, stirring her soup. "You've transformed a crisis into a culture. Never let anyone diminish that." Leah shook her head. "Half the job's still ahead. Regulators will audit every corner. Lawsuits may drag on. People can change. Systems take longer." Elena smiled faintly. "You're still in it, right?" Leah nodded firmly. "I belong here." Later that evening, Leah joined Jordan at his modest loft in Brooklyn. They cooked dinner, together roasted salmon and steamed vegetables. There was no boardroom, no influence to manage, just two people connecting over something they both missed: simplicity. They talked about holidays, old friends, and the holidays Jordan hadn't had time to plan. Conversation drifted to their personal lives: Jordan's volunteer work, Leah's desire to mentor young professionals, the ways they hoped to give back. At one point, Jordan paused, hands stilling as he grilled the fish. "I wasn't sure how much I'd feel after everything," he said quietly, "but I feel alive. Not just because we did something right, because I know someone I trust is carrying it forward." Leah touched his hand over the pan. "You showed me what loyalty feels like." They leaned into each other, sharing warmth beyond the physical, something steadier. In the weeks that followed, Leah found her days filling up. She led transparency workshops. She helped onboard the newly hired compliance team. Regulators dropped in. She answered questions. Journalists called for updates. She provided measured clarity. Throughout it all, she was the face of Vail Trust, the woman who refused to stay silent. One morning, she got a message from a former Vailtech employee. MG, the whistleblowing analyst, had accepted a government job with SEC enforcement. A note said simply, "Thank you for holding me when I was afraid." She carried that message tucked in her planner all week. Holding some note in arms, but in courage, in resolve. Still, shadows lingered. The lawsuits filed by former board members accused Jordan and Leah, though unnamed, of defamation and damages. Threats surfaced online, some veiled, some explicit. The company's stock wavered each time a judge ruled on partial injunctions, or media outlets questioned motives. One evening, Leah found herself alone in her office, reviewing a threatening email. She stared at the screen, then closed the laptop. The hum of the city office was empty now. Then her phone buzzed. A text from Leah's mother in Ohio, writing that she was proud, that she and her father told their church group about Leah's courage. A photo was attached. Her parents standing outside their church, smiling, a small pride flag tucked discreetly into the frame. Leah felt tears prick her eyes, not regret, not fear but quiet power. "We did this together." She saved the message and changed into her coat. Outside, the snow had returned in soft flakes. As she waited for the subway, she closed her eyes, breathing in crisp air. People walked by, business suits, mothers, strollers, delivery workers, an old man feeding pigeons. She thought. She wanted to be someone who looked for truth in everyday things. A stranger in need of soup. A former colleague asking for help. An employee brave enough to speak. She wanted to keep watching the city, not as a battlefield, but as a test of courage, one day at a time. Back at Jordan's loft later that night, they sat at the kitchen bar with mugs of herbal tea, watching snow swirl past the window. He offered her a folded page, a printout of Vail Trust feedback summary. 98% of staff rated it. Trust building, many writing. "For the first time, I feel heard." She looked at the page, then at him. "Thank you for believing enough to start it." He leaned forward. "Number. Thank you for seeing past the company's fall and helping rebuild something that matters." She closed her eyes and let the moment settle. "We're not done," she whispered. "No," he replied. "This is just chapter 11. She smiled. "Chapter 11, and we'll write the rest carefully." They sat together until the snow outside turned into midnight hush, comfortable in the knowledge that truth, when carried steadily, could rebuild even broken worlds. Snow melted into slush on the sidewalks outside Vailtech's Midtown Tower as dawn broke over Manhattan. The temperature hovered just above freezing, and the sky glowed pale gray. For Leah, this morning felt like something tipping, not an ending but a threshold. She entered the lobby and paused for a moment, taking in the quiet hum of early arrivals. She saw familiar faces, some new, some nodding in renewed respect, and realized the corridors no longer held fear. They held possibility. Her first meeting was with the new executive team, overseeing the Vail Trust initiative. Jordan sat at the head of the long, lean table in a less formal capacity now, part of the transitional council. Elena appeared on a screen, remote presence, her voice crisp and deliberate. Leah opened the meeting. Today we reflect, but not celebrate. We set expectations. We own both failure and recovery. Vail Trust is more than policy. It's a promise to our employees, users, communities, and ourselves. She walked them through recent feedback. No anonymous threats, only constructive criticism and genuine concern. She outlined next steps: regular town halls, employee resource groups, external oversight dashboards, community outreach programs. When she finished, Jordan nodded, pride in his eyes. Elena typed notes swiftly. They shared a moment of quiet conviction. They were writing something new together beyond scandal and recovery. Afterward, Leah returned to her office where a visitor waited, an older woman wearing a soft blazer, carrying a file. She introduced herself as Dr. Grace Montgomery, a researcher from a nonprofit digital rights foundation. "I've followed your story," Grace said, handing over documents. "We've received letters from activists and survivors of data breaches. Vail Trust could be a model for other firms. Would you lead a joint effort on corporate transparency standards?" Leah's breath caught. "You want me to speak to partners? Write guidelines?" Grace smiled. "Exactly. And the world will listen, because you acted when no one else would." Leah accepted the folder, glancing at its title: White Paper, Privacy, Trust, and Corporate Accountability. She felt the weight of responsibility and possibility. That afternoon, she had a brief window to catch Jordan in the cafe across the street from her apartment. The cafe that had been their quiet anchor, season after season. They sat at the same table they'd once shared salmon and tea over gentle conversation. "You're thinking bigger," he said, stirring his coffee. She nodded, face thoughtful. "If integrity matters here, it should matter out there too. Not just for Vailtech, but for everyone who believes truth still counts." "It's why I've stayed connected," he replied. "Though my CEO title is gone, I still believe in stewardship, helping set things right. Maybe that's still my role." She reached for his hand. "And mine is making those lessons live inside and outside Vailtech." They talked about the future: speaking engagements, advisory councils, mentorship programs for whistleblowers and compliance officers. They spoke of trust building not as a slogan, but as a sustained discipline. They imagined a community of companies that chose transparency over opacity, not because they had to, but because they believed in it. That evening, back in her Bronx apartment, Leah settled into her routine. Music on, tea steeping, Martha knitting quietly in the corner. Leah updated her journal, a habit she had resurrected after months lost in the whirlwind. She wrote about humility, restoration, second chances, and an unexpected partnership born of shared convictions. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from the nonprofit foundation invitation to speak at a corporate ethics summit in Washington, D.C. Her part would be about honesty in communications and the unseen value of empathy. She paused. 1,000 possibilities pulled at her awareness. She answered with a crisp acceptance. Later, Leah found Jordan waiting outside the cafe once more. He had a gift for her, a small leather-bound notebook, embossed with initials, VT. Inside, he'd written, "For the truth, seekers of tomorrow." She looked up, touched by the gesture. "I'll write it well," he grinned. "And I'll be your biggest fan." They didn't need more words. The next day at Vailtech, Leah walked through an event spotlighting user privacy improvements. Her speech was calm, firm, honest. She spoke about empathy and policy, about restoring faith one conversation at a time. Employees applauded. Board members watched. Regulators took notes. Outside, the city harbored no illusions. The snow returned in light sprays. But inside real transformation was taking root. That night, Leah and Jordan stood on the rooftop again. The skyline glowed with millions of lights, quiet and grand, no drama, just their shared silhouette against the horizon. Leah turned to Jordan. We started with a question, a lunch, a choice. And now look at where honesty led. He placed his arm around her shoulder. It led to more questions, more beginnings. But we're still here in purpose, in partnership. She rested her head against him. The story isn't over. He kissed her temple lightly. It never is. The snowflakes drifted down softly, silent witnesses. And for Leah, Jordan, and the world beyond Veiltech, the next chapter waited and glowed with potential.